Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be talking about IDP rookies and where we think is their best landing spot. With us today is a special guest making his first appearance in Front Office Pros, which is none other than Jorge Edwards, who is the founder of Fantasy and Frames. Jorge, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, gentlemen, for having me on. The second we started talking, I think it was about a month ago, we had an initial chat of being able to get on the show. I was like, let's make this happen. I got to be on with you guys. I didn't go to the expo last year, but a bunch of the guys from Fantasy and Frames and gals who went, they interacted with you and they just spoke very highly of you. And it just, I'm very glad to be here.
Hike.
We're happy you're here as well. So we're going to go through 10 IDP players, guys. I hope you're prepared. Let's start off with the odds-on favorite to be the top IDP player. That's defensive end Dallas Turner from Alabama. Joe, what's your ideal landing spot for him?
Yeah, so this one has got some realistic NFL play, Steve, as well as, some fantasy implications. But I'm going to say Dallas Turner to the Atlanta Falcons. And that's the, most rumored he's going to go 8 to the Falcons. But I actually think it'd be, really good from an IDP perspective just because, Atlanta's got some good interior guys with, Grady Jarrett and Onyemata in the middle. But, they really don't have any edge rushers that will clog up Dallas Turner. So he'll instantly come in there, be a starter at edge for them. And I think should be able to be productive in that defense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. With all due respect to Lorenzo Carter and Arnold Ebiketie, Dallas Turner is hands down the play here for the Atlanta Falcons. Although I personally have him as far as rookie defensive lineman as my number 2. But we'll get to who my number 1 is a little bit later. But if it was going to be Dallas Turner, I would not hate it if I'm a Falcons fan. They've gotten no pressure. They addressed linebacker last year. They addressed the defensive back position this year. Now it's time to get to they whiffed on Jalen Carter. I think they should have taken Jalen Carter last year. They didn't. Now they get to make up for it this year with an edge rusher. And like I said, he's my number 2 edge rusher. But we're pulling strings here at the top of the edge rusher position here.
Well, Jorge, you may find consensus between Joe and I with that because neither of us have him as our number 1 edge rusher either. So we're interested to see if you have the same one as we do. But I'm going to differ from you guys here. My best landing spot for Dallas Turner is the Tennessee Titans. I think Turner will be better off in a 3-4 system, and I'm also not sure he could be the guy. In this scenario, he's playing across from Harold Landry while also getting help on the inside with Jeffrey Simmons. And that's my knock against the Falcons is I feel like he's going to have to be the guy for the Falcons. And that would be my concern from him from an IDP standpoint. Sure, he's going to get great playing time, but he's not going to get a lot of help. So that's why I like him better in Tennessee. When I watch the guy's tape, he's able to shift really well from speed to power. But in my view, I think he relies too much on his explosiveness to get around the offensive lineman. I think he lacks pass rush moves. So for me, if he's just a pure speed guy, he's going to try to get around the edge. That's where having guys like Landry and Simmons helping him would benefit him greatly. So that's why I like him with the Titans better than the Falcons.
One of the moves they made last year, Atlanta, bringing on Caden Ellis coming over from the New Orleans Saints, some of the things you saw from New Orleans from him, which made him fantasy viable, was not just his tackle numbers, but his ability to blitz and get pressures on the quarterback. So, I guess that's kind of where I'm disagreeing a little bit here in terms of, having that, adjacent guy that's going to free up, one-on-one opportunities for you. Don't get me wrong. Like Caden Ellis isn't setting the world on fire in any way whatsoever. But I don't hate what you just said as far as being opposite Harold Landry. I mean, that one-on-one opportunities, the win rate probably will go through the roof there for this rookie. No, I like that.
My only concern with that is I think is he was brought in with the Saints defensive coordinator in mind. It was a who do you know best, and that's who they knew. And now you've got Raheem Morris in there. So is he going to be utilized in the same fashion? Anytime you have a regime change, you just don't know. And so Caden Ellis is not a guy that they have a lot of belief. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't have a lot of belief in it. It's just that he's going to have to prove this to the new coaching staff because the defensive coordinator he once knew is no longer on the staff. So, and that's the same thing with guys like Troy Anderson, who people are huge on, and Landman. So these other guys that are kind of like would be possible good linebackers. I'm a little nervous about them, to be honest.
No, that's totally fair. Totally get that.
So on to our next player, edge rusher Jared Verse. Joe, what's your ideal landing spot for him?
Yeah, so I know curious to see who the number one is for Jorge, but I know this is our number one guy, Steve. And I'd like to see Jared Verse go to the Minnesota Vikings. I know they brought Gennard and Andrew Van Ginkel there, but let's face it, Van Ginkel's really just been a rotational guy, a backup. And, Gennard got to play opposite of Will Anderson. So why not bring in a guy like Jared Verse to kind of be the opposite running mate? And then, you got a guy like Van Ginkel for special teams. And God forbid one of these guys go down, he can step in and take that role.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit different here. And I think the Vegas Raiders do something 2 years in a row, and they go outside and they go after Jared Verse here at 13. I know they got Tyree Wilson last year, but you also saw Tyree Wilson kind of move inside a little bit. And where you saw in terms of snaps, Malcolm Kuntz be the guy, now you could make the argument like, oh, well, Tyree Wilson just needed a year to get under his belt. But like, what did he do when he had the opportunities? I don't think it was that impressive. The pressure rate wasn't there. And the fact that they were kicking him inside just kind of tells me, like, maybe we drafted somebody out of position. Let's get a do-over. Let's put somebody outside opposite Max Crosby. So for fantasy, getting that one-on-one opportunities, because you're doubling Max Crosby, which is going to free up whoever the opposite edge rusher is for fantasy, and that's what you want. You want those one-on-one opportunities. And I think Jared Verse is a much better edge rusher than Tyree Wilson was coming out last year. I think they get it right with this pick, though, with Vegas, if he goes there.
I'm assuming because you omitted mentioning it, he's not your number one defensive end.
He's not.
Wow. Okay.
He's my number 3. He's my number 3. Look, Jared Verse, one of the things, I liked about him is the fact that he could play, and both he and Dallas Turner, you look at the various scouting reports and they say, well, he can play in a 3-4. He can play in a 4-3. He's not scheme dependent. So with that being the case, he is my number 3. But there's somebody else there who maybe you could make the argument is scheme dependent, but I'm just a huge fan of his. But we'll get to him maybe a little bit later.
Oh, boy. Here we go. So my ideal landing spot for Jared Verse is going to be the Chicago Bears. I think Verse is more suited for a 4-3 defensive front. So for me, in this scenario, he goes ahead and plays across from Montez Sweat. I think he has a full arsenal of pass rush moves. That's why I like him. He can bull rush. He has the quickness to get around the tackle. He has an endless motor while pursuing the quarterback. And I think Eberflus, as a defensive-minded head coach, could get the most out of Verse. So if they do keep the pick at 9, or if they trade back, I really like Verse for Chicago.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you look at, here's the thing for fantasy though. And I'm kind of shifting a little bit from the rookie going to Montez Sweat for a bit. Montez Sweat, the year before Chase Young came back to 2 years ago, he was basically the guy for Washington, and he still put up decent fantasy numbers, decent pressure numbers. And he actually had a down year this past year, although led both the Commanders and the Bears in sacks, which is hilarious. I guess having a person opposite of him would be an added bonus. I don't know whether or not this would increase Sweat's values too much, but it definitely gives a higher floor for whoever would play opposite of Sweat. And Jared Verse, look, it was Vegas or the Bears for me, but something tells me Chicago may be going, wide receiver with that second pick. So, but I would not hate Jared Verse or elite defensive lineman going to Chicago. That would be great for IDP.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was very close to considering the Raiders as well. I just didn't know if they'd go back-to-back years from a realistic standpoint. Would they go back and go for a first-round edge rusher? I thought Tyree Wilson had bust written all over him. He's one of those guys. He's like a well, he could be, he's got the wingspan and he's got, look at his height and look at the power and, but he never showed it. Those type of guys to me, although I can't remember a guy. You got guys like Vernon Golston back in the day. It's just those type of guys I feel like the hype never lives up to the hype.
Can't be that surprised that the Raiders were the organization to take him, though.
No. So on to our next edge rusher. Maybe this is your number one guy, Jorge. Laiatu Latu. I know Joe's likes some as well. Joe, what's your preferred landing spot for him?
Yeah, for Laiatu Latu, I chose to keep him out west and put him with the Seattle Seahawks and play under Mike McDonald, who's now taken over as head coach for the Seattle Seahawks. I feel like the Seahawks need a little boost in that edge rusher room. Boye Mafe has been pretty good. Uchenna Nwosu, he's shown flashes, but I think they can do better. And Laiatu Latu, I feel like would be a lot higher pick, but obviously the medicals and the whole neck injury thing. So I think with those concerns, the Seattle Seahawks reap the reward and get to take him later in the draft here.
Yeah, I'm going to go. First of all, yes, he is my number one edge rusher. No,
there it is.
Yeah, the neck injury in 2020 doesn't concern me. You know why? Because in 2021 and 2022, this guy balled out at an elite level in terms of pressures, in terms of sacks, in terms of just every efficiency metric you want to look at for an edge rusher. This guy had it. And here's the thing: whoever gets him is going to get a discount, and I believe he is still going to go in the first round. I have him falling to 27 and going to the Arizona Cardinals. I think that this is going to be a huge upgrade for this team. You look at the depth chart here, courtesy of our lads. Zaven Collins, okay, we saw him have some success last year, but not a lot. Dennis Gardeck, no disrespect, I'm sure he's a wonderful person, but I think you pair him opposite of Zaven Collins, I think you're going to get a little bit more production from him early on. And then again, I go back to it again. I understand the neck injury; it was very serious. Like this guy was kind of getting written off in terms of football production, but he came back and was just super elite. That the performance of his year after the neck injury, that for me, calmed all concerns for him going forward.
So my ideal landing spot for Latu, and I'm with you guys because of the medical history, it's kind of a wild card as to where he goes in the draft, but I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions. In this scenario, he gets to play across from Aiden Hutchinson, which provide Hutchinson some help. While also Latu receiving a huge advantage, being able to get to the quarterback. Not to mention, I think this guy, I don't know about you guys, I think Latu is a Dan Campbell type of guy. Considering how much adversity he's had to face, coming out, having to deal with medical, coming back from medical retirement and be able to perform like he has. He also, won, I forgot what it was called. I think it's the Benerick Award maybe for like the best character, in college football. Or maybe it was a different one. Maybe I'm wrong about that one. But anyways, you get the point. To me, there's no denying his pass prowess. I think he's got great hand usage. My only thing, and you might find this as slanderous, Jorge, I think that Latu kind of reminds me of AJ Epinesa, but just a little bit more athletic. So that's why I'm not necessarily that enthusiastic about Latu, because I see Epinesa when I watch him. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were going to have shots fired so early on in the podcast. I didn't and like no disrespect to Epinesa, but like first of all, have we actually seen the ceiling of Epinesa? Given how much the Bills rotate their defensive linemen, that's a separate conversation. But
fair question.
Something that could be brought up there. I'm going to say he's a little bit better, and I say a little just as a joke there. I think he's obviously I have him as my number one edge rusher in this draft class. I'm a huge fan. Let's just put it like that. That's my response. That's my retort to the Epineza comparison as humbly as I
Have
can
you
say.
heard that comparison before? Is that new to you? Or
I've heard comparisons to elite edge rushers on in a 3-4. And I'm not saying he's this guy. I'm just telling you what I've heard a comparison to. TJ Watt.
What?
wow.
Do I think he's Lance Zierlein compared him to TJ Watt? Do I think he's TJ Watt? Earn that reputation before you
Right.
give that. You know what I mean? But that's pretty high praise. Now, I will say one of the things outside of Dallas Turner and Jared Verse, like I mentioned earlier, is that he is probably a bit more 3-4 dependent than other teams. But I don't. But I think the Arizona landing spot, they'll find a way to use him properly.
So one thing I'm just gonna just noodle on this. Okay. Epinesa, Iowa, in his junior year, he had 11 and a half sacks, total of 49 tackles. 2018, he had 37 tackles, 10 and a half sacks. Latu had 13 sacks and 49 tackles, and then in 2022 had 36 tackles for 10 and a half sacks. Just throwing it out there.
I'm curious what the pressure rates are in comparison between the two, because it's one of those things where, the sack numbers, is that a sticky stat? First of all, some would say no. Some would say yes.
That's fair.
But I would say that the pressure rates are what really separate Latu from a lot of these other edge rushers, because you want the opportunity, and you want the production, you want the opportunity to lead to something, sure. But I think you might find that there's a little bit more in terms of pressure rate efficiency on Latu's side that kind of gives him the little bit of a bump there.
Well, for the viewers' sake, we'll postpone our case study of Epinesa versus Latu, and we'll go to the next player, which is defense.
I'll give my 2 cents in. I'd for the case study, I'd like to put my chips to the side of Latu. I like Latu a lot. He's such a smooth player, the way he moves around and everything. So I think, in the case study, you'll find that he's going to be better than Epinesa.
Interesting. So next guy we got here, guys, is defensive tackle Jer'Zhan Newton from Illinois. Joe, what's your preferred landing spot for him?
Yeah, for Jer'Zhan Newton, I would like to see him go to the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, Wilkins moves on to the Raiders. They lose him. They got a spot to fill a defensive tackle. And, for IDP, one of the main things is you want a guy that's going to get playing time and have a chance to be on the field. Well, now that Wilkins is out of there, he'll be exactly that, and they'll need him to come be that number one defensive tackle spot on their defensive line.
It's funny, the two defensive tackles that we'll be talking about today, I have them going in either or scenarios for my next two picks, but I have him in terms of location. I have Newton going to the Rams. I think they attempt to fill in the Aaron Donald hold. Look, you're not filling in Aaron Donald. Nobody's Aaron Donald. But what I like about him is the fact that in 2023 he was the highest producing pressure causing defensive tackle, say that 3 times fast, in all of college football, not just in the Power 5 conferences. You saw, his 48 total tackles, show you, and 32 defensive stops, which I want to say is second in all of college football last year. So what are you getting? You're getting an efficient pass rusher who got 8 sacks, who has a good pressure rate, who can make tackles, who can get the tackles. So what did we like about Aaron Donald for fantasy? We like the fact that he could beat the one-on-one blocks. You like the fact that he can get to the quarterback. You like the fact that he can help and run the run game and getting tackles or tackles for a loss. And so these are all key metrics that translate really well, both for fantasy as well as for the NFL.
So for me, my preferred landing spot for Jer'Zhan Newton, and I will say, guys, I would love this landing spot for him, which is the Houston Texans. Can you imagine Newton paired up with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson? Foley Fatukasi is a one tech, so we don't, he's just gonna, kind of take up bodies. And Danico Autry is 33 years old, I'm pretty sure. He's not gonna be playing much longer. So Newton's a pass rushing defensive tackle. That's a lot of value with him, because a lot of times with defensive tackle, if you're not in a defensive tackle required league, people are like, I don't care about defensive tackles. But if you are, right? You're going to want a guy who's going to be able to have sacks. They're going to have have pressure rates. Going to have that pass rushing ability. Well, Newton definitely has that. You mentioned Ray his pressure rate in college. For me, honestly, if he went to Houston, now this would depend on everybody else's landing spot as well. But in defensive tackle required leagues, I might consider Newton as like the number one guy in this class, in my view, if that happened, because I think him with Hunter and Anderson would be a deadly combo.
100% agree with that. But it makes you wonder, though, with the investments they made along the defensive line, is that a priority for Houston? But in terms of like ideal landing spot, like dream landing spot, like yeah, that would set them up for years to come.
So going on to the next defensive tackle that you mentioned there, Jorge, defensive tackle Byron Murphy II. He's been on a riser since the combine. Joe, what's your preferred landing spot for him?
Yeah, well, kind of piggyback off of what Jorge was saying for Jer'Zhan Newton. I've got Byron Murphy to the Los Angeles Rams to play next to, Kobe Turner. Talk about another, pass rushing defensive tackle. He had 5 sacks last year at Texas, but he's just got, he's very twitchy, and I feel like he's got that explosive first step. And like you said, nobody can come right in and fill in for Aaron Donald. He's just that type of player, but they need somebody to be come in and be a force on there. So I like Byron Murphy with the Rams.
So I'm going to go here and say that Byron Murphy goes to Miami. I think they start to rebuild this defensive line that was just utterly decimated by injuries down the stretch. I don't know if you guys watched the in-season Hard Knocks where they follow the Miami Dolphins, and they're always like a week or two behind in the airing of their episodes. And as you're watching it, you're like, I know what's about to happen in this game. Oh, that's where Jalen Phillips tore his Achilles. And like, oh, this is where Bradley Chubb tore his ACL. Like seeing the utter decimation that this line have. And now you have Quinyon Williams going to Vegas. I think they just start from the interior and work their way out on defense.
Quinyon Williams went to Vegas?
Not Quinyon. What am I trying to say? Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins.
Wrong AFC East defensive tackle there, Jorge.
Right. But equally as impressive, if not, well, not as equally.
If that happened, watch out for Vegas, man. Quinyon Williams and Christian Wilkins in the middle with Max Crosby. Yeah. Watch out.
I have no idea why my mind went to Quinyon Williams, but no, Christian Wilkins. Excuse me.
No, I'm just pulling your leg. So my ideal landing spot for Byron Murphy, I think it's the first time we've agreed yet. Any of us have agreed on one spot, but I'm going to go with the LA Rams. And partially the reason why I picked the Rams for him over Newton was, and maybe this is a lousy reason, and you guys can throw tomatoes at me if it is, but he's a shorter defensive tackle, 6'1", 308, kind of a similar size to Donald. So I feel like we've already seen the Rams coaching staff know how to develop Donald. Obviously, McVay hasn't been around since the beginning of when Donald was the player, but I think there's value in knowing the blueprint of a type of player and how to best utilize him. And so to me, I think him going to LA makes a lot of sense. He gets to, partner up with Kobe Turner and Byron Young, young defensive line there in LA. So I like that spot for him.
One of the things I will say that is equally impressive for Byron Murphy is that he actually has a higher pressure rate, or at least did in 2023, than Jer'Zhan Newton. So there's less of a tackle upside or floor there that was established last year, but the pressure rate, that's impressive. And now you, like you said, you pair him with Kobe Turner and this defensive line. Now you're starting to build something there. So I don't hate that landing spot either. You guys are spot on.
Real quick, let's say hypothetically, because you guys like the Newton pick to Houston. So Newton to Houston and Murphy to LA. In your guys' mind, are either of them better? Would you rank them higher than Jalen Carter on Philly? Or would you still have Jalen Carter on Philly still as 1?
I'm assuming we're talking for fantasy. Yep.
Yes, correct. IDP. Yep. And I'm throwing you a fastball here.
No, I still have Jalen Carter. You know why? Because I've seen him have the pressure rate in the NFL, and these guys I have not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would still have Carter ahead. I mean, plus, Fletcher Cox retiring also clears more path for playing time along that defensive line in Philly. So, yeah, I'll go Carter.
Yeah, those both are good points. I agree. I just was curious how you guys felt like they stacked up as prospects and how you would like that. So going over to the next player, linebacker Payton Wilson, a personal favorite of mine. But Joe, what is your ideal landing spot for him?
I like Payton Wilson as well, Steve. And I got him going to the Dallas Cowboys. I really feel like they've just really lacked having a good linebacker. They lose Leighton Vander Esch, who played pretty well, but they bring in Eric Kendricks. They kind of had guys, Damone Clark, Marquise Bell playing. To me, they're not really your prototypical linebackers and linebacker size that you'd want. So I think bringing in Payton Wilson, who has great coverage skills as well as speed, athleticism, and then can also fill in the run and play along Kendricks. And Kendricks is on a 1-year deal as well, so they're going to need some sort of a succession plan. So I like the landing spot of the Cowboys for Wilson.
So I have Wilson actually as my LB1 in this class, just because his high tackle rate, which was 17.2% in 2023. He only had a missed tackle rate of 4.7%, which is, again, both numbers bordering elite in terms of efficiency. But what I really liked about him is that when looking at all the linebackers in college football, he was number 12 in total pressures with 22. He was tied with 6th with sacks. And so having an off-ball linebacker having that ability to apply pressure is super awesome, which is why I have him going to Tampa Bay at 26, because you lose Devin White, you lose that pass rushing efficiency from an inside linebacker that he was bringing to the table. Now you're able to just supplant that, get him later on in the draft, and maybe he doesn't go in the first round. Maybe the Tampa Bay gets him in the second round or whenever their next pick is. But I think they do address the linebacking position, and no disrespect to Servassier Dennis, who has one of the coolest names out there. I just really think Payton Wilson would fill in that spot a little bit better, which is why I have him going to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Payton Wilson's my number 1 linebacker in this class as well. I feel he's very underrated. I think maybe it's just because he doesn't have this, flashy name or bloodlines. He's just, it just seems like he's just that guy. I thought that he maybe could take a Jack Campbell type of rise. I don't think he's getting as much buzz, but I mean, obviously Campbell was drafted in the first round. We did not expect that. We didn't think any linebacker would get drafted in the first round, and then off-ball linebacker. I mean, and Campbell got taken. I wouldn't be shocked if he sneaked in the first round. I think he's the only guy that would be worth it, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, my best landing spot for him is going to be the LA Chargers. Jesse Minter is now a defensive coordinator. They're going to need a captain of that defense. Both starting linebackers are no longer there. Eric Kendricks went to the Cowboys. Kenneth Murray went to the Titans. Right now, their current linebackers on the roster are Denzel Perriman. Guy can't stay healthy. Never has been all that great anyways. No offense. And then Nick Neiman. So neither of them concern me as far as playing time goes. And there really isn't a lot of help in the interior defensive line. So I think Wilson will be able to rack up the tackles. He doesn't do anything spectacular, but he's just solid in a lot of areas. So if he went to LA, I think he could do really, really well.
You like that. And of course they lose Murray in free agency also, who is, again, playing a little bit differently, but one of the things that you're notice about the Chargers this year is that these picks aren't going to be sexy. These are going to be foundational pieces that they're going to be trying to set in place for the Harbaugh era for the Chargers. And next year, focus on the wide receiver, the top wide receiver there. You're not getting any of these high profile guys to help out Justin Herbert. This is a Justin Herbert, let's see what you do with nothing year. But we're going to build up all the other core foundational pieces to at least try to make this somewhat competitive. No, that sounds really cool. I like that pick.
So going on to the other linebacker we're going to be talking about, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. A lot of people have him as their LB1. Joe, what's your preferred landing spot for him?
Yeah, well, once again, kind of piggybacking off of Jorge here, I like Edgerrin Cooper to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to fill that Devin White role. And one of the reasons I like Edgerrin Cooper to go there is his pass rush skills and his ability to blitz. And obviously, he had 10 sacks in his senior year. So that's something that he's good at as well. But, they have Levante David, KJ Britt as well. That none of those really scare me. So I think he could step in and be a starter.
I'm going to go with Edgerrin Cooper going to the Green Bay Packers. They get rid of Devondre Campbell. You still have Quay Walker, not a great coverage linebacker. You have Isaiah McDuffie, who was great for fantasy last year. Whenever it was either Walker or Campbell out, you could just trust Isaiah McDuffie into your LB spot, and you were getting decent production. But again, not a great coverage linebacker. According to PFF, Edgerrin Cooper is rated as the LB7 in coverage. His average depth of tackle was 0.7 yards. Like, he's barely letting any of these receiving options get out of the backfield. So this guy plays well, whether he's doing it in man coverage or zone coverage. And then he brings that added dimension of being the linebacker 1 in sacks, according to PFF. LB6 in total pressures as an off-ball linebacker. LB7 in defensive stops and tackles for a loss. So I just feel like they address the linebacking position here. And let's face it, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that Green Bay continues doing what they do in every pick. Ever since LaFleur has taken over as the head coach, they've gone defense, I want to say, at every first round since his regime started, if memory serves me correctly. Don't quote me on that. And I just feel like this is an area that they can use some beefing up on.
Outside of Jordan Love, I think that might be right, but I don't know if Jordan Love was with LaFleur or not.
Would that be I think maybe that was his first year.
Yeah,
after his first year.
Yeah, I think Love might have been the only one.
There you go. That's right. There we go.
So for me, when it comes to Edgerrin Cooper, I think his ideal landing spot for me is going to be the Minnesota Vikings. My concern with him is I believe he's somewhat of a tweener. I think he's going to have to bulk up to be that inside linebacker. I think he's that kind of combo guy. Is he going to play more edge? Is he going to play more off ball? That's the part I don't know. I agree with you. I mean, he's a very interesting player. He has that pass rushing ability. But the reason why I like the Vikings is because I think he's going to have to go to a creative defensive play caller that can really leverage his strength. Insert Brian Flores. He's one of the best defensive minds in the game. I think Cooper would be able to really step right in as a starter. I mean, I know, Joe, you're a big Ivan Pace guy. But other than Ivan, but he was undrafted. They haven't put a lot of stock in him. And then they newly signed Blake Cashman. I'm not scared of either of those guys. And then if he does somewhat play edge stuff, like you said, Joe, earlier, Van Ginkel is more of a rotational edge. So does he play kind of some snaps there? Does he play some snaps at linebacker? I mean, I think he should be more used kind of all around the field. That's the type of player he is. So if he doesn't go to a defensive-minded, like a strong defensive mind, I have concerns for him. So that to me is why I like him with the Vikings.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, I feel like Flores would figure out a way to use him to your point, having a good defensive mind that could use them creatively.
I guess my only concern with Minnesota is that they're very similar to the Rams, where they basically roll 3 safeties and have one predominant linebacker taking the majority of snaps with sprinkling in of an LB2 every once in a while. And that is, okay, are you saying right off the bat, year one, that maybe, he takes the majority of snaps? I too am an Ivan Pace guy, University of Cincinnati, linebacker, undrafted. You guys nailed that earlier. But yeah, I mean, they bring in Cashman, they have Pace. Now you're drafting Cooper. Like, I think this is probably more of a dynasty play than it is a potential redraft play for him. But the fact is that they do employ that 3 safety, 1 linebacker look more often than not. That does concern me in terms of the opportunities he might get going forward.
That's a good point. I do think, though, that he has a lot of range that could afford him to be that one linebacker. Because, I mean, that's a lot of pressure you're putting on that one linebacker guy, right? That you're going to have range to stretch the field. So I think that could possibly be helpful for him. But I gotta say, I do like the Bucs call, Joe. I mean, I do like that one a lot. I thought about them. He would fit kind of that Devin White role. That would make sense. All right, guys, on to the secondary. Joe, what's your preferred landing spot for cornerback Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, so for Mitchell, I pegged him to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like the Jacksonville Jaguars, the secondary has been a problem for a long time. And I think it's time for them to put some investment in there, grab a guy like Mitchell. I think he's the top cornerback in this draft. Just really like what he does as a player. And, Jaguars currently have Ronald Darby. They have Tyson Campbell, who I feel like just hasn't lived up to what people thought he potentially could be there. So why not bring an athletic guy in like Quinyon Mitchell to play there?
I'm going to go with him going to the fourth worst coverage unit, according to PFF, in the NFL last season. I have him going to the Detroit Lions. I think they beef up the secondary. No disrespect again to Amick Robertson, but they addressed the other side of the field with Carlton Davis in free agency. I think they get somebody to shore up the rest of that secondary. And there are two cornerbacks that we're talking about that could very easily fall in there. So, as well as two teams that just jump out to me in terms of just I feel like this is like a pick or a player. It's like where he's going to go in the draft this year. I feel like it's going to be like a luxury pick. I don't think this is going to be like necessarily a necessity pick early on, and especially in the first round or in early parts of the draft. I see Detroit going after him at this point in the draft, and not to mention, you look at how well he's played coming out of Toledo. I want to say he's held quarterbacks to a passer rating of like sub 70, which is ridiculous, right? So I think just adding that to an already starting to get built up secondary will go a long way to helping him.
So my ideal landing spot, I'm going to preface this to Joe, you're not going to like it. But my landing spot is for him with the Denver Broncos.
Oh, boo.
Look, there were high hopes that Riley Moss out of Iowa Hawkeyes was going to turn into something for the Broncos. He barely saw the field. Broncos already have one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL with Patrick Surtain. Now they place, but they place Mitchell right across from Surtain, making the two of them a fearsome duo in my mind. The problem now is teams shy away from Surtain, and they just pepper Damari Mathis with targets all day long. So, when it comes to Mitchell, he led the team with 18 PBUs this last season, which is really impressive. He's had 6 career interceptions. So I think when you got Surtain and Mitchell, you can't just target one of them. I think both are then benefited. A lot of times when you just have one guy, they could just shy away from him. So I kind of like the idea of them being paired up together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all fine and dandy for fantasy and dynasty to think that way, Steve. But in reality, I just don't see this happening. I think Jorge's right. That Mitchell in these corners will probably be more of a luxury pick, and to me, that the Broncos are not in a situation to be doing luxury picks in the first round for corners.
Yeah, but I mean, you saw the Kansas City Chiefs, what they were able to do with L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. They won with that.
Mahomes and a franchise quarterback. That's a luxury.
Well, I just telling you, I would, from an IDP standpoint, I'd love the landing spot with Denver.
Hey, I don't disagree with you there. Just try to bring it back down to reality here.
Well, we're watching the draft, and they take Quinyon Mitchell. I'm going to be like, is it reality now?
Yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, I mean, if it happens to be reality, I'm not going to like it, but.
All right, let's go to the next one before Joe gets some agita over here. We're going to go with the next player, quarterback, possible safety, Cooper DeJean. What's your preferred landing spot for him?
Yeah, I like Cooper DeJean going to the Green Bay Packers to kind of, they got Jair Alexander there at corner, Stokes, but Stokes, often gets injured, feel like he's not that reliable. And then if he happens to be safety, I mean, Ford's still a free agent right now. They lose Jonathan Owens as well. So I feel like they could use some secondary help. And then, from the dynasty standpoint, I know in our league, Steve, this is, we do this, but if you get points for, returns, you're going to want to have this guy because it's something he did at Iowa and he's really electric.
So I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, this is going to be a luxury pick for them. They brought back in the defensive backfield C.J. Gardner-Johnson at strong safety. They re-up Reed Blankenship. They have Darius Slay. Who's the weak link? I think it's James Bradbury. I think they upgrade that cornerback position there. What does this do for fantasy? Probably not too much, but in terms of NFL production and kind of getting back to establishing that defense to where it was a couple seasons ago when they made their run for the Super Bowl, I think this will go a long way to helping them do that.
So I'm going to preface that I talked about how you didn't like my prior pick, Joe. Well, I'm not going to like this pick as a Bills fan. But I think the best landing spot for Cooper DeJean is the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs traded away L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason, leaving a hole at starting cornerback. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, and now in this scenario, he'd be able to use DeJean, which in my view is the ultimate chess piece. He could play outside. He could play nickel. I think he could possibly play some safety. And like you mentioned, Joe, he also he can become a nightmare when it comes to the return game, right? I mean, Kadarius Toney has not been what the Chiefs thought he would. So I think the Chiefs could possibly use this guy all over the field, and I'd be sick to my stomach hearing about it when I watch him. But I think that he'd do pretty well in IDP.
Yeah, I'm not so sure he's going to be there though. I feel like
you don't think he'll make it that far down?
He'll make it to the end of the first for the Chiefs pick. I really feel like what he showed on his pro day and how he was able to run the 40, especially after that leg injury as well. I feel like he's going to go somewhere in the 20s, and I don't think he'll make it to the Chiefs at the end.
All right, guys, so let's round out the show. We got one more guy here, safety Tyler Nubin. Joe, what's your ideal landing spot for him?
Yeah, for Tyler Nubin, I like this guy, Steve, as a safety. So I put him with the New York Giants to fill the role of them losing Xavier McKinney, at that safety position.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's New York for me. They have to address that McKinney loss, and he, what's really great about him is that he's a super efficient tackler. Like you see a lot of these defensive backs, the missed tackle rates are in the double digits. This guy is right below that at 9.4 missed tackle rate. I love that. I like the tackle volume. I like the solo to assist tackles. So he's getting there. He's making the tackles by himself. What does that mean? That means more fantasy points for solo versus assisted tackles. He's getting you the defensive stops all over the field. So I'm right there with you for New York.
Well, guys, I guess we got to make it 1, 2, 3. I think New York as well. However, it's the team that actually resides in New York, and that's those Buffalo Bills. I would absolutely love the landing spot. I'm with you, Joe. Nubin's one of my favorite prospects in this draft. They lost Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. They're basically hitting the reset button at the safety position. I know they've got Taylor Rapp, and they brought in Mike Edwards, but I'm not really nervous about either one of these guys. I think Nubin probably goes now in the second round just because he didn't really perform that well athletically. But honestly, I'm not really bothered by it. The guy's just a ball player. He's got great range. He's got great instincts. And you know what? He's got it in between here, right in between the ears. I think he's a natural. He's a great ball hawking safety. And here's the thing. If he goes to Buffalo, he's already joining a defensive nucleus that's already really strong. So I would be ecstatic if the Bills could get this guy in the second round.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot for him, Steve.
You like what I did there, with the New York, the only team that
was like
curveball.
Although technically, I guess the other two New York teams are Jersey, so
right.
You could say like the only team in New York is the real team.
That's true. I kind of was deceiving. I was deceiving when I said I agreed with you, but then I really was, don't look at this. Look at the other hand,
Yeah.
Everything he does is just really well. Even though he'd be playing further out in coverage as free safety, as like he did in college. Look, again, it goes back to his tackling. He plays well against the run. He even got a sack last year. So this guy can literally be lined up all over the field and be much more of a Swiss Army knife that I think people are kind of assuming that he's going to be just playing in coverage most of the time. I would love this for New York. And you look at what New York's done with Brian Burns, opposite now Thibodeau. You have Bobby Okereke at linebacker, and now you're shoring up the loss of Xavier McKinney with the upside of Tyler Nubin. This could be a scary Giants defense in either this season or in a couple seasons.
So that does it for our IDP rookie best landing spots. We've been doing a series of all the best rookie landing spots. If you haven't checked it out yet, we've had quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends. We've been kind enough to have a couple guests on to be able to join us, which has been a lot of fun. Jorge, thanks so much again for joining the show. Where can others find your great work?
You can find all of my work over at fantasyandframes.com. Would love it if you followed us at Fantasy and Frames, whether it's on Twitter. Yes, I'm still going to call it Twitter until the day I die. I'm not going to call it X, even though I just did. Instagram, TikTok. If you could follow us on our YouTube channel, that would be really awesome of you. As well as everywhere on social media at Fantasy and Frames. We do a lot of great work over there. And we've been doing IDP for years, and we love IDP. And the fact that you all do IDP, it's just, it's a small community of the IDP content creators. And so we got to look out for each other. And, I just want to say, Steve, Joe, I'm really honored that you guys asked me to come on. I'm thrilled to have been here, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all some more.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, Jorge.
Yeah, agreed. Appreciate you coming on as well.
And for those who are listening, we would recommend the Fantasy and Frames channel. Go ahead and check them out. And if you don't follow them already, go ahead and do so. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.